Hello, my noble band of outlaws. Outlaw Samurai coming at you live with a video on this ungodly hot, sweltering day. With not like that was doing much good. The cold steel Italian longsword. Now you may be wondering, Outlaw, why do you have the Italian longsword? You blunted it so it can't cut anything. I have no cutting stand set up. We are going to be discussing something that I have been thinking of late. And that is the viability of a longsword with a cup hilt. Now, this is a very crude cup hilt analog. It was the closest I could get without having to cut one of my bowls. But it works, but it is in the general shape of a cup hilt. And as you can see, I can still perform the same kind of flourishes with the cup hilt on, and I can even put my finger over the crossguard with the cup hilt in place. So why is it that longswords in general did not have cup hilts in history? Now, from the research I've done, there are close to cup hilts on longswords with complex hilts. Some did have clamshell guards, some did have rings, and some did have a complex rapier style hilt, especially the Swiss saber. That's immediately comes to mind whenever somebody says complex hilt on a long sword blade, and I mean long sword as in two-handed sword, not long sword as in double-edged long sword. So, why is it that we don't see cup hilts in history when, in actuality, a cup hilt is an extremely versatile and good form of hand protection? As you can see, as soon as I put the point out, my entire hand, relatively, because this is a small analog, is protected by the cup hilt. Alright, even my wrist, to an extent, is protected by the cup hilt. Also, techniques that involve thumbing the blade or putting your thumb above the crossguard, your thumb is in complete, well, pretend this is metal. It's completely encased in metal. And even the techniques that involve fingering the guard, yes, I know how that sounds, get it out, get that thought out of your mind, you filthy degenerates. That's why I'm not making this rated 18. I could easily make my videos rated 18, don't tempt me. But in any case, for techniques that involve fingering the guard or putting your finger above the crossguard, the cup hilt serves to basically make it nigh impossible to get your finger cut by an opponent's blade. Now, we do see cup hilts a lot on rapier style blades. And they make sense on a rapier because of the fact that a rapier is more often than not a single-handed blade, and the way you fight with a rapier is usually you have one hand outstended and the other hand either put back behind your back, or in some treatises the offhand is actually used to parry the rapier blade by actually smacking the rapier blade as your opponent goes in for a thrust. Now, Why was this not done on longswords? Well, because cup hilts, like all complex hilts, add a significant amount of weight to the sword. Now you're probably thinking, oh, Outlaw, you see people swing rapiers around like they're nothing, so elegant and dainty. No. Rapiers are deceptively heavy swords. All the weight of a rapier, at least in my mind, it's an 80-20 split. 20% of the weight is the blade itself, and the other 80% is the grip and handle construction. The reason people can move a rapier blade around so daintily is because of mass distribution. The mass is centered more towards the hand, making the tip more agile. It's the same when people say katanas are blade heavy. A katana's weight is centered more towards the tip to facilitate a stronger cut and to encourage a choppy action. Longswords like the Italian longsword or rapier blades with these very aggressively acute profiles are used more for stabbing and thrusting than they are for cutting. So I think the reason why it was not really done on longswords is because of the fact that a longsword already is a fairly big blade. Most longsword blades, even this blade, are designed to facilitate good cutting and strong thrusting. A rapier sacrifices almost all of its cutting ability for thrusting ability. Now, not to say a rapier can't cut, because a rapier can cut, but a rapier cannot cut as well as a katana or a cut and thrust oriented longsword. This is because of how thin and narrow the blade profile is on a rapier. They can deliver flesh cuts, which are cuts to the flesh, but as soon as a rapier hits bone, most rapier blades, unless they are a military rapier, which I'll get to in a moment, will stop at bone. Now, a military rapier is actually a rapier with a wider, more robust blade that is capable of doing significantly more cutting than its civilian counterpart. Alright? Look up the L.K. Chen's Gothic rapier, and that is an example of a military rapier. I believe Scala Gladiatoria and Scalagrim have done videos on that. But all you really have to do is go to YouTube and type in L.K. Chen rapier. Now, personally speaking, I believe that the benefits of having a cup hilt outweigh the weight problem. You can always go with the jock answer of, oh, just get stronger, lift the iron, pump the things, dumbbell row. Like, you could always go Jimbo route and just say get stronger. But in truth, I personally believe that the benefits of the cup hilt being that your lead hand, which is the hand that is most likely going to be targeted in a sword fight, is completely protected. It does not impede the performance of the longsword whatsoever. You can still perform the same kind of techniques, flourishes, that you would with a regular cruciform hilt, which is the regular crossguard hilt, that you would with a cup hilt. And the reason I say this is because if we look at history, there are many, especially early to late Renaissance era longswords that have rings on them, or bars like we see on side swords and rapiers. Look no further than the German Kriegsmesser, for an example. It has a nagel on it. Now, the nagel is a little bit restrictive, because it does block off one whole side of the blade. But you can, in fact, still do your Kronpaus with a Kriegsmesser and a katana. You've seen me do them with Kriegsmessers and katana. As I'm filthy gaijin dog who combined European Hema and Japanese Kenjutsu. But yes, you do, the pros in this instance, I believe, outweigh the cons of the fact that you have basically a full-on mini buckler or shield attached to your sword. The cup hilt allows you, and even another benefit, the cup hilt basically allows you to could potentially deflect an incoming thrust, and definitely will help deflect incoming slashes. And as your opponent slides down your blade, this cup hilt actually performs another necessary step. Because let me just take that off for a minute. So, if you and your opponent are in a bind, like so, and they slide down your blade, your crossguard can protect your hand, but you can also get sniped if they change direction on you and if they manage to keep you in the bind long enough. With the cup hilt, on the other hand, that same thing cannot happen as easily. And as I said, it has a chance to completely deflect off the sword. Now the major con of this is the weight, as I said before. The added weight of the cup hilt could, in theory, tire the swordsman out more, but there are ways to compensate for that. You can make the blade a little thinner. You can add a slightly larger pommel. Or, to really sell the argument, I can hear you say now, oh, but Outlaw, if they had complex hilts that would weigh roughly the same as the cup hilt, couldn't they just use the cup hilt instead of the complex hilt on the longsword? Yes, because the material used in a complex hilt is roughly the same amount of material that you would use to create a cup hilt. Just melted down into a brick and then thinned out. Now, others could argue, well, what about comfortable carrying? I could hear some of you say. Surely the cup hilt must make it uncomfortable to wear. Anyone who's worn a sword on their belt can testify to this. Alright? Especially in the Japanese community, subas tend to dig in if you have a bit of a belly. Alright? Especially when you wear them low enough as you're supposed to. With a cup hilt, that doesn't actually dig in. That actually makes it more comfortable because the cup hilt's curve will hug your body. So, with the pros being an excellent form of hand protection, pretty much a miniature buckler that's attached to your blade, and the ability to keep your hand and wrist safe from the potential of sniping cuts simply by keeping a forward guard, and the ability to deflect cuts off of a bind, with the only con I can see being the actual physical weight that it would add. Now, as I mentioned before, these were used on rapiers, specifically Spanish rapiers. So, I don't know if there may be a Spanish longsword that uses a cup hilt. There very much could be. I did not come across it in my research. But I personally believe that a longsword with a cup hilt would in fact be an extremely versatile weapon. Because as I've demonstrated, it does not actually impede the movement at all. And there are actually longswords that have sidebars that go up much higher on the blade than this proto cup hilt. But let me know what you think down in the comments below, my noble band of outlaws. If you think this would be a good design, and I even find this aesthetically pleasing, to be truthful with you. But that's just me. Let me know down in the comments below what you think. This has just been like a little nerdy sword rant thing. So until next time, my noble band of outlaws, Outlaw Samurai tells all y'all, be crazy rednecks, be safe, use your weapons, and I'm out. Peace.